Lips. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to John Dudley Speaks. I'm your host, Groovy Tony, and I'd like to introduce you to a new segment on the show called John's Perspective. Now you might be thinking, isn't that what he's already doing? No, not necessarily giving my perspective on things. You know what, I'm not going to even explain it, let's just move along. Now, I plan to use this segment primarily to do off-the-cuff album reviews, so expect this to be a little looser and have a smaller runtime. Thank God. Starting off this segment is an album that I'm very excited to cover, which is ScHoolboy Q's Blue Lips, his first record in 5 years. Now, if you're not familiar, ScHoolboy Q has been part of the Top Dog Entertainment roster since the early 2010s. The same label that's the home of SZA and the former home of Kendrick Lamar. So when they hit the height of their fame in the mid-2010s, so did other label mates such as Ab-Soul, J-Rock, and most specifically ScHoolboy Q. His albums Oxymoron and Blank Face LP were critical commercial successes, both for Q and for TDE, and contained hit songs like Man of the Year, Studio, Collard Greens, Groovy Tony, That Part. Things changed a bit towards the latter half of the 2010s when ScHoolboy Q released Crash Talk in 2019, which wasn't bad by any means, but still just didn't deliver on the substantive portions of his previous albums. And even though the production and strong song structures are there, it's just not up to par with his peers' contributions to the genre. Yet it's still heavily influenced by albums like Astroworld, KOD, and even I Am Greater Than I Was, but it wasn't exactly doing any of the influencing at the time. So after 5 years, how do you come back with something fresh but still feels inherently familiar to fans of your old work? In ScHoolboy Q's case, you drop Blue Lips. The beats across most of Q's projects are steeped in this dark aesthetic that crosses between trap and gangsta rap influences in an inventive way, with Blank Face LP being the best synthesis of these elements. With Blue Lips, I'm happy to say that these aesthetics are back in full force, but this time with a heavy hint of wistfulness, soulfulness, and reflection. There's subtly lighter tones that complement Q's songwriting, but at the same time, he's able to retain that muscular presence that he's been known for through a musical foundation that's built on odd production stylings that go out of their way to not fit into any particular box. The soft guitars on opener Funny Guy, for one, make for an atmospheric amalgamation with Q's almost psychedelic delivery, but then it's instantly contrasted with the aggressive guitar tones and pounding percussion of Pop, which is one of my favorite beats on the entire album. References to classic 2010s tinged mainstream trap are all across this thing, meshed with a Mac Miller dreamlike soundscape like on Cooties, and I found that to be most fitting on the tribute to Mac, Blueslides, easily one of the best songs of Q's entire career. But to balance this out, you got propulsive bass-heavy bangers like Back in Love, Yearn 101, Movie, and Lovebirds, the latter of which has a bit of a Yeezus influence in its chaotic cuts between soulful and industrial. The best example of this mix is definitely Ohio, one of the biggest swings in ambition for Q at this point of his career, yet it goes down very smoothly and understatedly, evocative of his former label mate Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Not all of it works across the project though. I definitely think there are times that Q goes a little too hard into the vocal layering, and sometimes he's hitting production pockets that sound a little bit too close to J. Cole, but I see what he was going for here, and I think he absolutely nails it. Love of mine, don't you dare. What I found to be the most exciting aspect of Q's lyricism here is his blatant vulnerability, specifically on the autobiographical processing of grief that is Blueslides, his blunt addressing of his own pain and his viewpoints on mental health in relation to the rap game, and its inherent toxicity towards male rappers sharing their feelings was subtle but very powerful. We do have the typical bars that we've come to expect from Q here, but I found it wasn't skewering too heavy into the oxymoron territory and was more skewered towards the Blank Face LP territory, where his spare stream of consciousness approach comes off as more honest and authentic. He does have some filler bars here and there that do not work. The first half of First in particular is pretty weak lyrically and honestly a little grating, but when these hooks and verses work, and most of them do, he's operating on a high level that feels both loose but also overall thematically tight. I think this might be the best Q has ever sounded on a record. For real. His flows are subversive and full of mystique in a way that's always suited him, but there's a bit more gruff to it that aligns itself more with a JID and Freddie Gibbs vibe, which is awesome because Freddie pops up on Ohio, and it's amazing listening to these incredible artists join forces on this multi-phase beat with energy and ferocity. And that goes for all the features here. Lance Skywalker is great, Absol is absolutely fantastic, Rico Nasty kills it. But make no mistake, Q keeps our focus on his performance. The speedy flow on Foo especially is fairly tantalizing in its haunting aura and how it complements Absol's more aggressive delivery. What I found most interesting though is how Q is able to balance his cheeky demeanor that we've grown accustomed to from albums like Oxymoron, but he keeps himself restrained and bottled up, allowing the production to carry the chaotic atmosphere of the project until it's let out in breathless tracks like Time Killers. It really demonstrates his versatility on the mic after all these years. The track list here is pretty standard for most rap releases, but still 18 tracks can be a little bit of a chore at this point. Luckily here it's not too much of a hindrance, but it does hold this album back quite a bit. Q hits a snag with Nunu, which is kind of like an A$AP Rocky inspired psych R&B track. It isn't bad, but it just isn't up to par with the rest of the quality of the album. But it's immediately followed up by Back in Love, which is such a corny lo-fi banger. You really can't hate it because it's just genuinely so much fun. The back end of this album can drag after this point. However, it's hard to complain when you have a gem like Germany 86, which is really just one verse, yet it's so profound in how much Q is able to pack into it, especially with its simplistic storytelling and how it weaves into the themes of pain and suffering that are across the entirety of this project. From there, Time Killers does the same thing, but with even more assurance and aplomb, allowing Q to round out a trilogy of great tracks at the back end of this album to close it out, with Pig Feet and Smile coming right after. So while the composition can vary at times, the album straightens itself out by the end, becoming a coherent musical statement that hits hard with a pretty incendiary bite. So yeah, I really enjoyed this album. I put it right up there with Blank Face LP, but who knows, maybe it will surpass it. I'm definitely going to be coming back to this one a lot this year. This really sets the standard for rap music in 2024 at a height that most artists it would be hard for them to accomplish. But yeah, check it out yourself. This is just my perspective. So I encourage you, if you're a TDE fan, if you're a rap fan, if you're a fan of great music in general, I'm sure this is something that you'll vibe with. All right, that's all I got.